Hey everybody, so today's video we're talking about x and y intercepts. Now, past couple days we've been talking about slope-intercept form, which gives us one of the intercepts. It gives us the y-intercept. But today we're going to be talking about, okay, how do we find both the x and y-intercepts in equations that don't exactly look like slope-intercept form, and then how can we use those to graph? So just want to refresh our memories for what each of these variables stand for. First of all, this is called slope-intercept form. And yesterday I probably did the dramatic hand effect that slope-intercept form finds two things. It finds slope and the y-intercept. So if I'm looking at this equation here, I know that y stands for the output. I know m stands for the slope. X is our input, and b is our y-intercept. And the thing that I want to focus on in particular is that b is the y-intercept. And what does that mean? Well, the y-intercept means that if I have a graph of a linear function, the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So if I was looking for the y-intercept in this line, it would be right here. That's my b value. And remember that y-intercepts, what do they look like? What is the form that y-intercepts take? We're going to take a look at that and what x-intercepts look like here in this video. So x-intercepts versus y-intercept. If we're looking at a y-intercept, well, we just talked about that on a graph, that would be where it crosses the y-axis. So this would be the y-intercept. And then y-intercepts, what form do they take as a point? Well, we talked about yesterday that there's 0, a number, 0, a number b. So that means that the x value is always 0. So if we're looking for a y-intercept, we're looking, okay, where is the x value 0? That means that it's going to be on my y-axis somewhere. Very similar when we're looking at the x-intercept. If I draw my graph, if I draw one similar to this one here, my x-intercept is going to be here. That's my x-intercept. Now, what is that point going to look like? Well, it's going to be the opposite of what our y-intercept looks like. Instead of the x value being 0, the y value is going to be 0. So it's going to be a, 0. So that means the y value is 0. And this a value here is always going to be some number. Now, it can be 0. The only time that a linear function can have an x-intercept and a y-intercept be the same number. Think about when that would be the case. That would have to be with direct variation, because that would mean that it goes through the origin, meaning it goes through the x-intercept and the y-intercept both at 0. So direct variation is super easy because the x-intercept and the y-intercept are the exact same. All right, now we're going to go through how to find your x and y-intercepts. So if I have the equation negative 2x plus 3y equals 12, I could go through if I wanted to and rearrange this, put this into slope-intercept form, but I don't have to. I can find the x and y-intercepts using our knowledge of what those points look like. Because remember, for the x-intercept, that would be a, 0, and the y-intercept is 0, b. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the x-intercept. So I'm going to look for my x-intercept. I know that that point is going to have 0 as my y-coordinate, So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in 0 for y. Negative 2x plus 3 times 0 equals 12. 3 times 0, that's just 0, so I have negative 2x equals 12. And then all I have to do is divide by negative 2, and x equals negative 6. So my x-intercept is negative 6. All right, same type of thing with my y-intercept. My y-intercept, the only difference is I'm plugging 0 in for x instead of y. So I've got negative 2 times 0 plus 3y equals 12. Negative 2 times 0 is 0, so I'm just left with 3y equals 12. Divide by 3, y equals 4. So I think I remember mentioning that 0 is our friend, 0 is a nice number. 0 does a lot of good things for us because it just gets rid of a whole term, and it's super easy to solve. So figuring out what this means, the x-intercept is negative 6. So I always want to give my final answer as the actual points. So if my x-intercept is negative 6, that means that I have the point, I'll write it in red here, I have the point negative 6, comma, 0. So that's my x-intercept. My y-intercept, if y equals 4, then I have the point 0, comma, 4. So really not too bad, and this tells us a lot of information. I know it crosses the x-axis at negative 6 and the y-axis at 4, so I know it's going to be a line going through those 2 points. All right, another example down here at the bottom. Find the x and y intercepts of the line negative 5x equals 2y plus 10. So same thing, I'm going to be finding my x-intercept first, and then my y-intercept. So with my x-intercept, to refresh our memories, that's a point on the x-axis. So looking back up here, remember that's a comma 0. So I'm looking for a comma 0. So I'm going to plug in 0 for y. So I've got negative 5x equals 2 times 0 plus 10. Well, 2 times 0 is 0, so I'm left with negative 5x equals 10. Divide by negative 5, x equals negative 2. And right away, I'm going to write my answer as a point. If negative 2 is our x value, that means I would have the point negative 2, comma, 0. All right, now looking for the y-intercept. So I'm going to plug in, so I'm looking for 0, comma, b. So I'm going to plug in 0 for x. Negative 5 times 0 equals 2y plus 10. Well, negative 5 times 0 is 0. So 0 equals 2y plus 10. Then I got to get rid of this plus 10. So I'm going to subtract 10. Negative 10 equals 2y. Divide by 2. Y equals negative 5. So remember, I'm going to write my answer as a point, 0, comma, negative 5. So I know it goes through negative 2 on the x-axis and negative 5 on the y-axis. So I know that point is going to, or that line is going to go through those 2 points there. All right, so then what I want to do is I want to be able to graph lines using those x and y intercepts. So this question here says graph the following line using x and y intercepts. So here's my equation of my line. Same thing we were doing before, it's just one step further. I'm going to find my x-intercept. Remember, my x-intercept is a comma 0. So I'm going to plug in 0 for y. 4x minus 2 times 0 equals 8. 4x equals 8. Divide by 4. X equals 2. So that means my point is going to be 2, 0. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that on my line here. I'm going to go 2 in the x, 0 in the y. Crosses that x-axis at 2. All right, same thing. I'm going to find my y-intercept. So my y-intercept is going to be 0, b. So I've got to plug in 0 for x. 4 times 0 minus 2y equals 8. Make sure you're careful. Remember that minus sign. Negative 2y equals 8. Divide by negative 2. And y equals negative 4. Which means my point is 0, negative 4. So it's going to come down here, cross the y-axis at negative 4. And then the last thing that I do is anytime that we're drawing a line, we want to make sure that we actually draw the line between those 2 points. And make sure whenever you're drawing a line, you need the arrows on both ends because you're telling us that we're going infinitely in both directions. If you don't have those arrows, that means you're saying it stops right where that line ends, or stops up here wherever that line ends. So make sure you remember those arrows. All right, another example here. Graph the following line using x and y intercepts. So what do you notice about this equation already? Y equals 2/3 x minus 2. You should notice something about that equation. You should notice that it's in slope-intercept form already. So what does that mean about this negative 2? Well, that means that negative 2 is my b value. So I've already got the point 0, negative 2. So I don't have to do any solving for the y-intercept because I know it's going to cross down here at negative 2. So really the only work that I have to do is to find the x-intercept. I got to find the x-intercept, and remember that's a, 0. So I'm going to plug in 0 for y. 0 equals 2/3 x minus 2. So to solve for that, I got to add 2 to both sides. So I get 2 equals 2/3 x. And remember, how do we get rid of that 2/3? Well, we have to divide by 2/3. Dividing by 2/3 is the same as multiplying by 3/2. When you do that, you get 6/2 equals x, and 6/2 is the same thing as 3. So my x-intercept is 3, 0. So now I've got the point 3, 0, and all I have to do is draw my line between those 2 points and put the arrows on each end. All right, last thing that I want to talk about, kind of a challenge problem. I'm going to leave this up to you guys. I want to see if you can figure these ones out. I want you to see if you can find the x and y intercepts of these 2 lines here. Think about what kind of lines they would be. This one should be a little bit easier because think about what the slope would have to be of that line. Then use that same concept to figure out this one. I want you to try it on your own. If you don't get it correct, that's totally fine. That's why it's called a challenge problem. Other than that, good luck on these, and we'll talk more about it after the long weekend on Tuesday.